All right, guys, how are we doing today? So, I want to review another documentary here called Tech for Trump Silicon Valley Turns on Biden. Now, I know this gets a little political, but this is just from 6 days ago, and CNBC created it. So, I just kind of want to go over it, see what you guys' thoughts are, and let's get into it.
Final Web Design, this is Steve.
Alright guys, so let's start the video here and let's get your thoughts.
Behind me, a mega fundraiser for former President Trump is about to take place. But this isn't Mar-a-Lago, and it's not Trump Tower. This is the heart of San Francisco, a liberal bastion of America. But
So I just think that's funny right off the bat is how they highlighted that this is San Francisco, probably the most liberal or left-leaning city in the United States, which also at the same time is the tech hub of, the 2000s, of Facebooks, of Twitters, all the big businesses are out of Silicon Valley as far as tech traditionally. But obviously, as you can tell over the last few years, things are starting to change in San Francisco. Things are starting to change in California. A lot of people are maybe changing their ideas a little bit. So let's continue watching. Just kind of wanted to point out where this is all taking place.
Recent years, a growing circle of tech elites is switching camps. They're vocal, they're emboldened, and they're filthy rich. This week on Tech Check, Silicon Valley turns to Trump.
Well, I think that's kind of an overstatement. I wouldn't say Silicon Valley has turned to Trump. It's still, again, probably one of the most left-leaning cities in the United States. However, I think everything in tech right now is in such kind of a mess, to say the least. It's definitely not what it was a few years ago. And I think I pointed that out in another video. So let's get into here. Let's see why people are kind of maybe changing their opinions or their thoughts, at least here in the tech industry. And again, this is only 6 days old, so that's why I wanted to highlight it as we kind of get into this whole political season.
It's a gathering of A-list tech heavyweights, and it signals a shift happening in the traditionally deep blue valleys of the Bay Area. 50 grand a ticket or $300,000 a pop for a VIP ticket that includes a photo with the former president. Pocket change for the tech founders and investors in attendance. David Sachs, the venture capitalist who owns the mansion, he's one of the newer, more vocal conservatives in the industry. He donated to Republican candidate Mitt Romney's campaign in 2012 and then Democrat Hillary Clinton in 2016. This year, he has thrown all his support behind the Republican Party.
Wow, that's crazy to think that he, voting just a few years ago for Hillary, and now he's putting his money behind Trump.
Supporting Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' presidential bid, and now hosting the first fundraiser for President Trump after his conviction. The other host of the fundraiser, VC Chamath Palihapitiya, has also switched allegiances. He donated more than $250,000 to Biden in 2020, according to campaign records.
I am an apolitical person who has to make a difficult decision every 4 years. And I think most of us are like that.
Sachs and Palihapitiya
donated $250,000, $250,000 to the Biden campaign just 4 years ago, and now he's switching allegiances. That really says a lot as far as how his business, his economy, how the state of things are right now. And not only the U.S., but the whole world with this inflation. The cost of everything is just going up dramatically. And I think that's become one of the biggest issues.
They make up half of the All In podcast, dedicated to giving an inside look at tech investing and wealth. It's amassed a loyal group of hundreds of thousands of listeners an episode, and it's an example of how supporting Trump in the tech industry once vilified you, but now can glorify you.
Wow, that's quite a statement. How it used to vilify you, but now can glorify you. Isn't that the truth? I mean, if you're not from the United States, you would have known that, the last few years, the last maybe 10 years have been very politically up and down. And I mean, if you didn't, if you were a Trump supporter, you would get just kind of labeled as this, and this. But now I think the reality of everything's kind of playing forward, that at the end of the day, the economy helps everyone. And even these big tech companies right now, they're feeling it. The tech industry has had the most layoffs we've had since I've been in it in the last few years. All the big companies, the Microsofts, the Teslas, the Googles, I mean, they've all laid people off. So
unthinkable just a few years ago.
I know there's going to be a lot of people who support Trump, but they don't want to admit it. And I think that this event is going to break the ice on that, and maybe it'll create a preference cascade where all of a sudden it becomes acceptable to acknowledge the truth.
Already signs of that shift. Saks' San Francisco event was sold out.
The fundraising momentum is really on Trump's side right now. He outraised Biden in April. His campaign says he raised $141 million in May alone. And a number of billionaires who swore never Trump have come back to him.
Some say it's a small but vocal group supporting Trump. That doesn't represent any kind of sea change.
All-In podcast and some of the supporters there are not based in the Valley. There's a bunch of MAGA extremists in every part of society, and I hope we can prevent them from destroying democracy, which is probably the most important issue we face.
Others.
Trump mega extremists and destroying democracy. I mean, that's kind of where I was just saying how you always got kind of labeled with that, but then again, as you kind of see this video, you know, where are people moving their ideas to? What do people see that works?
Argue that they're giving cover to a larger group that is shifting their support.
Those loud voices like Saks and others give air cover for people to have personal beliefs. San Francisco is a place, and the tech industry is a place where it's always been hard to compartmentalize personal from professional.
For example, yesterday I was with Ken Goldman, the former Yahoo CFO who used to manage Eric Schmidt's home office. And he says that folks he talks to, where he lives in Silicon Valley and in New York as well, that there's really been a shift in support. He calls it undercurrent support because people don't really want to raise their hands. And it's not so much that it's pro-Trump. It's not a huge amount of support for Trump as much as it is against Biden.
A group that increases.
I think that's a funny statement too, and this is probably why Biden actually came in the first place. Is it's not a vote for Trump, it's a vote against Biden. Whereas in the last case, it was not a vote for Trump, it was a vote for Biden, or a vote against Trump for Biden. So I think a lot of people, they voted for Biden to the lesser of two evils. However, as things have played out, it hasn't necessarily been beneficial to the country, to the economy, to just the state of people's finances and the businesses. So I think that's why you're seeing people being a little bit more vocal this session, and we'll see how that turns out.
Includes insiders at Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firm, Sequoia Capital. Its track record includes early investments in the now titans of the industry like Apple, Google, Oracle, YouTube, and Instagram. But Sequoia is also symbolic of a more openly divided Silicon Valley. Some partners, including Sean McGuire and longtime Republican Doug Leone, are publicly backing Trump, even doubling down after the former president's guilty verdict. Leone listing his concerns: the immigration system, ballooning deficit, foreign policy missteps, and more, despite
So here's the big thing that I see, as you can see here. It's the broken immigration system, the ballooning deficit, the foreign policy missteps with whether it's Ukraine or, you know, Israel, the Middle East, and just the economic situation. So I think that these have been big factors. And obviously this was posted June 3rd. So this is very relevant to what's been happening over the last few years, and I think a lot of Americans are feeling this way. It's not just Doug.
January 6th riots. McGuire announcing that he'll be cutting a $300,000 check to the ex-president. But on the other side, there's former Sequoia partner Michael Moritz. He's a known Democrat. And with hedge fund manager George Soros, he poured $3.8 million into it.
George Soros, oof.
Anti-GOP group last year. The size of Trump's recent donations also suggests a shift in who he's seeing support from. Back in 2016, large contributions, that's those above $200, they made up just about 14% of his campaign's war chest. In 2020, that grew to 51%. Today, it makes up around 69% of his bankroll. Meanwhile, large contributions make up about 54% of Biden's donations.
So far this election cycle, Trump and the Republican National Committee have raised more than $42 million from wealthy mega donors. That compares to about $35.5 million for Biden.
So there's the numbers. Money raised from billionaire donors, which is most of the tech industry. 35 million to 42, and I think that this has even changed a little bit over the last week.
Biden and the Democrats, and it puts Trump at about a $7 million advantage despite receiving funding from about half as many billionaires.
As for the recent defections, many point to a loss of faith in Democrats, whose policies they say are not open to tech interests or are becoming more hostile towards them, especially relative to President Trump's last term.
Yeah, a lot of regulations, a lot of taxes. It hasn't been as friendly as the Trump administration. Even a lot of the H-1 visas and, all that stuff, you can get into it. But the last couple of years have been difficult in the tech industry, and I think a lot of people in that industry are feeling it.
Which saw corporate tax cuts that boosted the balance sheets of mega caps. He also got tough on China while creating exemptions to protect tech companies from those tariffs. Government contracts, they went to defense startups like Palantir. And his attacks on social media would prove toothless. Now in 2024, some in tech see him as better than the alternative. Critics say Biden's pick for SEC chair, Gary Gensler, for example, has been unreasonably hostile against cryptocurrencies, calling the industry rife with fraud, scams, bankruptcy, and money laundering. And
So I just want to talk about cryptocurrency because that is a big thing I do enjoy. We need to keep crypto in the U.S. We need to not put all these regulations and move it over to Dubai or, over to Europe. We need to really focus to try to embrace crypto because whether you like it or not, it can work in hand with the U.S. dollar, but to put all these regulations and to scare crypto out of the country that's not going to benefit anybody in the U.S.
President Biden appointed Lina Khan to head the FTC. She vowed to herald an antitrust revolution, cracking down on big tech. She's investigated and blocked dozens of mergers and acquisitions, the lifeblood of the startup industry.
So if you go back to Obama's administration, he was doing high-profile interviews with Mark Zuckerberg. He hosted a tech conference on the White House lawn. He was loud and proud about how the tech industry was a jewel of America. Biden has been much colder towards the tech industry. His policies related to gig workers, artificial intelligence have been noticeably more regulation heavy, and that has seriously strained relations.
And that's where the tech industry has really gone now. It's all gig work. It's all Fivers. It's all small businesses. They're not hiring people in-house anymore because they can't stand to pay $100,000 a year for somebody to manage their website, So a lot of it's gone to outsource, and what's that also drawn is that it's drawn a lot of business overseas because it can be done cheaper.
Defense tech is another industry aligning with the right after government contracts under Trump went to startups like Palantir, a darling of tech and founded by the original Silicon Valley Trump supporter, Peter Thiel. Palmer Luckey, founder of the defense startup Anduril and Oculus VR, he's hosting another fundraiser for Trump after David Sachs in Orange County. And Jacob Hellberg is a senior Palantir executive who recently announced a $1 million donation to the Trump campaign after donating hundreds of thousands to Biden in 2020. Founders Fund partner Delian Azparuhov puts it this way. 4 years ago, you had to issue an apology if you even said you voted for him. In 2024, every major defense tech fund is sharing a stage.
That's kind of funny. 4 years ago, you had to issue an apology even if you said you voted for him. Wow, times have changed.
Fake culture wars only distract us from our economic decline. And nobody in this race is being honest about it except Donald Trump.
That was Peter Thiel at the Republican National Convention in 2016. A turning point. His support for candidate Donald Trump surprised many in Silicon Valley. At the time, 140 prominent technologists penned an open letter denouncing Trump's politics, and the entire industry had publicly donated less than $3,000 to his campaign. A fundraiser for Trump planned by the then CEO of Intel, it was abruptly canceled after the New York Times began probing his support of the Republican nominee. Thiel, the ultimate tech insider, seemed like an outsider when it came to supporting Trump, at odds with the uncomfortable summit of big public tech CEOs at Trump's White House shortly after he took office. Some tech commentators argued that Thiel did not represent Silicon Valley, but more would come around. Even if they didn't explicitly support Trump, they would embrace his politics.
The Republican agenda has been much friendlier or at least not as hostile towards the tech industry as the Democratic agenda.
One of the most dramatic shifts has come from one of...
And I think that says enough. Is people are tired of being regulated. People are tired of the government stepping in on all their businesses. And you heard it there. I mean, the Republican Party is a lot more like, hey, run your business, do what you got to do. The Democrat Party is a lot more like, hey, we're big brother. We're going to, monitor your growth or lack of growth. And, you hear it firsthand.
Tech's most powerful and richest leaders, Elon Musk. A supporter of Democratic candidates and policies in the past, his political affiliations have evolved. Over the last few years, he has promoted various pro-Trump causes on his platform, X.
I think all of our political ideologies have evolved. To say it's just Elon Musk, I mean, no, you have to live an experience, and you have to know what's the best for you and your future and your family and your business.
Those openly backing Trump envision a presidency that benefits their interests.
If you don't believe that Trump is going to ignite World War III and end democracy as we know it, and I know a significant portion of the population does fear that, so if you leave that aside, generally a Trump presidency could benefit the tech industry because, again, regulations against artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, gig workers, Republicans aren't pushing that agenda.
But maybe only as long as they stay in his good graces. His opponents argue the former president is unpredictable and can make decisions based on personal vendettas. Amazon, for example, blamed the former president for losing out on a major cloud contract to Microsoft because he didn't like the company and, more specifically, its CEO, Jeff Bezos. The majority of San Francisco is still heavily liberal. Protesters flocked to the street outside of David Sacks' home ahead of the fundraiser, while other opponents floated the Trump chicken in the San Francisco Bay. That's a 33-foot inflatable chicken that resembles the former president, complete with a golden side-swept hairdo and a striped prison.
I mean, that stuff was all funny back in, the last election, even the first 2016, 2020. But I think people are kind of like, okay, so, I mean, you can make fun of Biden too. You can make fun of, we're not here to make fun of people. We're just trying to get a better life for not only ourselves, for the world, for the economy. And some of this stuff is just, now it's getting boring.
Prison jumpsuit. Many of Trump's exclusionary policies hit close to home for those working in tech or living in the Bay Area, especially around immigration and LGBTQ+ policies. Most of the venture capitalists that have publicly thrown their support behind Trump, they make their living investing in private companies. Far fewer executives of public companies have stepped into the spotlight with their endorsements, a steeper ask when factoring in shareholder interests or potential consumer boycotts. One thing, though, is clear as the presidential election approaches, the political winds in Silicon Valley are shifting.
Well, and that's it. Take it for what it is. I'm not here to get political on either side. I just wanted to highlight that it's 6 days old. It's talking about tech. It's talking about, the San Francisco Valley. It's talking about what to expect here in the next couple months. And whatever you guys choose, or, that's totally separate. But I wanted to go over this. I wanted to just take a look at what I thought about this. So if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. That stuff helps, guys. And we'll catch you in the next one.